So, I'm Cassidy. I work at a company called Centrifuge. We're about 15 people based in Berlin. And today I'm going to talk about Centrifuge Chain, which we're building as the gateway for real-world assets into the blockchain Multiverse. So what we're going to cover today is intro to Centrifuge, what actually are we doing, what problem are we trying to solve, and then I'm going to go into what are the efficiencies of building a single-purpose chain. It's a question I get a lot, and that's why I wanted to do this talk, because I think it's a good question. And it's nice to get a little bit of critical feedback, and so I'd like to explain why we're doing this. We are a bridge to Ethereum, so I'll just cover the bridge that we're building as well briefly, and then finish with our vision for Centrifuge Chain. So jumping into what the issue is that we're trying to solve. So global B2B spend, this is actually, all comes in the form of invoices. And unfortunately, the payment term for a lot of invoices is really long. The global average is about 60 days. And a lot of businesses, even medium-sized businesses, not just small businesses or freelancers, they need financing to bridge this gap. And it becomes a real problem for sustainable growth long-term if they don't have financing for this time period. And so we built Centrifuge to give businesses greater access to financing, and we think this unlocks value that has previously been inaccessible. So our mission is to change the rules of global trade to foster economic opportunity everywhere. So look at our stack. Centrifuge OS allows businesses to exchange documents, such as invoices, on our peer-to-peer layer. On top of this, we've built Centrifuge Chain to hold the single source of truth of these documents for all of the parties that are involved. Centrifuge Chain also allows for anchors, identities, and the minting of NFTs. We then built TinLake, a securitization protocol, to optimize the risk allocation and open up access to financing for these documents, for these assets. And then this TinLake gives access to the DeFi ecosystem. So we see Centrifuge as a system of coordination for global trade. It's designed to be minimally extractive and provide an incentive to connect profit-driven businesses with their customers. So we built this design for scale, and we think that this vision that we have for our global trade protocol is why it needs to be public and openly accessible. So how does Centrifuge actually work today? A company, such as Paper Records, signs and sends an invoice and sends it to Spotify. Spotify verifies the receipt of that invoice, and then Paper Records is able to then verify and anchor the signed document hash of this invoice. This signed document hash also contains both signatures of both Paper Records and Spotify, and so you have this unalterable source of truth for the asset itself. And using all of this information, Paper Records is then able to mint an NFT that represents this invoice. And all of this today is already live on Ethereum. And the cool part about having this on a public blockchain is that third parties can always get access granted to the system. And so we're built on and loving Ethereum, but this has some downsides. Ethereum is a world computer, and it serves many purposes and use cases, and as a result, a lot of operations are unnecessarily slow and costly. So we built Centrifuge Chain to achieve efficiencies and new possibilities over this architecture. So Ethereum is multi-purpose. It's designed to fit lots of different types of use cases. It has high security guarantees, it has a very large market cap, and it is a really large ecosystem, as evidenced by this great event. There's community-driven governance, and all of those things are wonderful, but they also have drawbacks for Centrifuge. So this leads to long wait times for our transactions, and this depends on the gas price. There's also really high cost for transactions. So this anchor, for example, it costs about 10 euro cents, and minting an NFT costs 170. There's also no efficient way to do privacy on Ethereum, and this is something that's really important for Centrifuge. And the reason why the cost of these transactions is so important for us is because the average invoice volume per day of a Fortune 500 company is 18,000. And so imagine paying 10 cents per invoice. That's just not going to be viable for most businesses. So these were the driving factors of Centrifuge. And so we think that it's really easy to use, and I think probably makes more sense to use Ethereum for low volume and really high value transactions. But for this enterprise targeted, really high volume, privacy requiring use case, we needed something that was going to be different and suit that specific use case for us. So we built Centrifuge Chain to optimize specifically for the transactions that we require. So we specifically wanted to optimize for cost. There's less competition between transactions to get in a block on Centrifuge Chain. The target that we have with Centrifuge Chain, it also allows for faster execution of logic and finality of transactions because they're optimized for our specific use case. We also are able to customize. We're building with Substrate, and we can have custom modules, such as being able to target storage specifically. So storage is more efficient and minimized because of our optimization. And this actually also, in turn, encourages decentralization because there are less resources that are required to run a node. And I would say one of the more important things is this last point here, that we're really targeting a specific user as well as a specific privacy requiring use case. So we're able to then target the specific use case with Centrifuge Chain going forward. So we're also building this general purpose substrate bridge to Ethereum. And we think this is important because we need to be able to connect Centrifuge Chain to the DeFi ecosystem. And right now, that largely lives on Ethereum. And we are also really big fans of the Ethereum community, and we feel like we are a part of it. And so we're doing joint development of this bridge together with ChainSafe. It's open source. The first version, it includes a trusted setup, and it's just two-way transfers of ERC20 to native substrate currency. But the next version will also include two-way transfers of NFTs as well. So this is how we imagine Centrifuge will look together with Centrifuge Chain, this bridge, and bridging over to Ethereum. So this business can then mint a token on Centrifuge Chain, send these invoices, anchor these invoices, and do all of this in a way that's much more cost and speed effective for them. And then when they want to access financing, they're able to use this bridge, go over to Ethereum, and access DeFi there. So we really think Centrifuge Chain is the gateway for all off-chain assets to the blockchain multiverse. We are building on parity substrate, so this really allows us to move faster and use a consistent approach when building certain features. And at the same time, we're able to build this standardized bridge to Ethereum that can be reused by other projects, and we hope it's reused by other projects as well. And easily tap into the Ethereum ecosystem with this, as well as the Polkadot ecosystem at a future point in time. So we really envision a larger ecosystem of many connected blockchains, and dApps can live on Ethereum and use data from other chains, value can move freely, and Centrifuge Chain can enable off-chain assets to access financing through DeFi. So Centrifuge Chain is a proof-of-stake chain. It has its own token radial with economic incentives that are similar to other proof-of-stake chains, such as Polkadot. We have a council right now with 5 seats. Our Amber testnet has launched, so you can check it out on telemetry. And you can already get started on Amber now. You can run a validator. You can start integrating with Centrifuge. You can try to break it. You could try to just use it, ask questions. We'd love to hear them. And yeah, I think we're really excited to take this next step forward, and mainnet launch is coming up. So these are some links if you'd like to get involved. And thank you for your time today. Feel free to ask us any questions. I'm not sure if I have a couple minutes for questions now. Yeah? Does anyone have a question? It's okay if you don't. Yeah.
What's kind of the plan so what's kind of the plan to onboard the non-EthCC crowd? Because I can see the value prop here, and it seems really interesting, and use Spotify, for instance, as an example.
Yeah.
And you've done a very good job at articulating quite complex ideas, but how do you convince a retail company to use your platform?
Yeah, that's actually what Leah is focused on here in the front. And we actually have a few partners that we were already starting with. So I would encourage you to actually check out our Medium blog if you want to learn more about those partnerships, but I can briefly explain one of them. There's a, oh my God, coronavirus scare. There's a company called Paperchain based in New York that takes and gathers data from Spotify actually, and is able to then allow their users, the artists, to get financing for their music royalties. And so we're working on a pilot together with them, and we've actually done, I think, together 280,000 DAI of financing so far for this pilot. And so these artists are able to get financing actually, whereas traditionally with Spotify, they might get paid once or twice a year. And so this is actually really speeding up the process for them to be able to get paid. And in a way that, like, not only was it just not possible for them before, but on top of that, the interest rate actually isn't that high for them. And I think this is also super important, that we're not just creating something that no one's going to use, but it'll actually have a competitive interest rate in addition to providing financing to those who had zero access. So to answer your question, I mean, Paperchain is a startup, so they're a little bit more open to using new kinds of things like this. But we are also targeting enterprises and traditional companies as well. And I think there, we're not talking about Centrifuge Chain quite as much. It's more about the product and what they're going to be able to use and offer to their users instead of just getting straight into the details from the beginning. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? I would take one more, I think. No?
Yeah, hi.
Yeah, okay.
Just one more. I understood correctly, the licenses for all the stuff you're building there is open source?
Yep.
Okay,
Everything's open source.
Okay, so that includes this stuff you're building now. Are the GitHubs open, or they open up when they're finished?
Yeah, they're open.
Oh,
you can
cool.
check out our progress. Yeah.
Will do, thanks.
Cool. Awesome, thank you everyone.
Okay, all good. Thank you. Yeah, in the room.
The live stream didn't work, or? The live stream didn't work, or?
See, it worked, but I need to find, I think it's electricity from my PC. Yeah, together.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe the recording won't work, or?